Okay, are we ready? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mondays with Maishi. It is just after 9 p.m. on December 8th, 2025, and tonight we are once again joined by a recent presenter, Dove Finkelstein, who is a licensed clinical social worker in New Jersey. Hi, Dove. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us again.
Sure, my pleasure. How
Okay.
are you?
Dove, we got such nice feedback from your first presentation a number of weeks ago. And I feel like some of this, when we talk about different parts of psychoanalysis and any kind of psychodynamic work, it's just such a rich topic um, that has so much nuance and so many parts to it. So it's like, you touch on one thing and it brings up just a whole myriad of other areas and nuances. And so last time we were discussing some of the differences between psychoanalysis and relational psychoanalysis. And I thought, and you thought that it would be a nice idea to start getting a little bit deeper into some maybe case studies or, um, uh, uh, you know, discernments or discrepancies in how psychoanalysis would work over relational psychoanalysis, or what are the advantages or differences in relational psychoanalysis versus plain psychoanalysis. So tonight's topic is really the treatment of relational psychoanalysis. The relational part seems to be something that came after Freud, but seems so vital in the way people relate to the world, and therefore so important in being analyzed, studied, and explored in the context of the therapeutic relationship. So tell us a little bit about what you had in mind tonight, what we're going to be doing tonight, and then we'll jump into it.
Okay, so Maishi, I had something pretty basic to psychoanalysis, which is something that crosses every school of psychoanalysis is analyzing the transference and countertransference. Now, obviously, there's going to be differences between the various schools, and the interpretations are going to be different, and how much the therapist brings themselves and their emotional reactions will be different. But there is a one of the major innovations of Freud is that by studying and examining the therapeutic relationship, you could gain tremendous insights into the client's general way of relating to other people and their psychopathology. And one of the most, I'll just Frida from Reichman starts her book of intensive principles of psychotherapy saying that she was a psychiatrist before Freud came up with this idea of transference, countertransference. And she remembers how saturated the room was with unprocessed feelings. And that when she learned about transference and countertransference, the revolution it made in her practice.
And she was talking about both from the therapist side and the client side or the patient side, I'm assuming.
I think she's talking more from the therapist side right now.
Ah,
Yeah. And I'm sure for the client also, but she's giving the therapist perspective. And so what I want to talk about is I would say it would fit very well with the relational school of thought and with the interpersonal school of thought. And I really don't like doing comparative psychoanalysis. So I'm gonna stay in my lane, and I'm going to try to bring out a case that has three areas, three different, we would say, relational episodes that I think shaped the whole treatment and changed the trajectory of this client's psyche, so to say, if we could say something so bold as that. I and what I'd like is for the people to speak up when they have a question or thought. I know that a lot of this stuff is new to many people and sounds different, and I like to hear people's reactions so that we could try to bring it down in a way that's relatable.
that's great. And of course, I'm going to remind you, for those of you who are going to ask questions or would like to ask questions or say comments, to please use the React tab at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand, and then we'll call on you. And I also would love to ask those of you who can turn on your videos to please do so that we can get some face-to-face interaction. And Dove, if you don't mind, I'm just going to ask you, in case there's somebody here who is a student or an intern or doesn't want to admit that they might not know much about the term transference and countertransference, would you be able to give just a brief explanation or overview what it is that we're talking about?
Okay, so transference, obviously these terms have 120 years of history. Now we're at 130 years if we say the starting point of psychoanalysis was 1895. So they have 130 years of history, but transference is in very simple language, is the feelings and the and experiences that the clients feel to the therapist and project onto the therapist. So it's a very broad spectrum right now, where it means any feelings that the client has towards the therapist. Freud used it in a very specific way of transferring old relationships into onto new relationships onto the therapist. We now use it in a very broad way, any feeling the client has towards the therapist. The same thing the other way. Countertransference used to be something that was seen as, if a therapist has countertransference, it's something they didn't process and that they didn't work through. And now we look at countertransference as a rich form of information about the patient's dynamics. It's the feelings that the therapist has. So it both helps for diagnostic purposes, and it's also vital in many of the interventions that the client should feel the therapist's authentic self in the intervention. So therefore, the countertransference presently, at least from a relational interpersonal view, is both seen as vital for diagnosis and vital for intervention.
So if I could just clarify what I think I'm hearing you say, and maybe a few more words. I think you're saying that for diagnosis, it means to say that a therapist can get a sense of a client's interpersonal or relational style that they might have with others based on the way that the client or patient is working in the energy of the room between him or her and the therapist. So it's diagnostic. It gives us information. And when you talk about intervention, I also think, I'm not sure if you mean this far, but in terms of exploring with the patient or the client what it is that we are feeling towards each other in order to be able to work a new form, right, or to develop and cultivate a new form or healthier form of interpersonal relationship. Is that right?
Yes, yes. And we'll see, Maishi, as we go on, that it could be taken a step further than that,
Great.
but 100%. So, okay, so a major principle of relational psychoanalysis is that people develop in relationships. Children develop in the relationship with their mother, their father, their siblings, society, their class. This is how people develop, and their pathologies are many times based on unhealthy relational dynamics. So you have a person that whenever they do a certain thing, they're full of anxiety, and you ask them, "Oh, what? Maybe it's a specific phobia." And then you learn that their father was very nervous about a certain thing being broken in the house. And whenever they'd go near that area, he would have an extreme reaction. Then you realize it's not a specific phobia, it's a relational, it was developed in a relational framework. And so too, their healing takes place in a relationship. And that's with the clinician. And it's healing both because hopefully we'll have new positive relational experiences and we will repeat the old experiences. And through by repeating the old experiences in therapy and reworking them and processing them, the client can then let go of these self-destructive patterns. Okay, so with that in mind, that the relationships are the focus of treatment, both the client's relationship outside of therapy and his relationship with the therapist. I want to give a case example that again, there's three relational episodes that I want to try to unpack, and I'm very interested in hearing people's thoughts about this. So the case we're going to talk about, and I asked permission from the client to present his case, and I have consent. So, and the details are changed. So if you think you know him, it's someone else.
By the way,
Ruvain,
that's a trick. I know that trick. I use it also. It means that the details haven't been changed, so that you're going to think the details were changed, and then you're never going to guess who you thought it was based on who it may have been. I'm kidding.
Maishi, listen, man, listen. That's deep. So so it's like this. So Ruvain is a 31-year-old man who had been seeing me for 5 years. He came to see me when he was 26. He just left yeshiva and he was unable to move forward in life. He had psychosomatic pain. He was disconnected with his affect, and he basically asked me to give him life. He said, I just feel dead inside. He dated a number of girls seriously, and after 8 to 9 dates, which in his circle, which would be about the time to propose, he broke up abruptly. He was living at home when he came to see me and drove quite a distance to be here. He was very motivated to figure himself out. He saw me twice a week, and there was an askin in the community who had shaykhs to him who was paying for the treatment. At the end of the second session, he told me, by the way, if I reach 30 and I'm not married, I will kill myself. And based on my impression of him, I believed him. I thought that this was someone that, if treatment did not work, he will kill himself. Okay, so the first thing he told me about was that his life was going fine, was going well, was going fine until the age of 19, when he got word that his parents were fighting nonstop, day and night. His world was shattered. He always looked at his family as the epitome of a beautiful, wonderful family, and suddenly he wasn't able to function. Once he got word from a family member that the Shalom Bayis was struggling, he wasn't able to function. Okay, so his father is an eccentric person who placed himself on a very high pedestal. He told me that in his father's eyes, he has no doubt that he's one of the Lamed Vav Tzaddikim, 36 hidden righteous people. He identified with his father and was unable to see any negative in him. And he didn't see that his father was very mean to a bunch of his siblings and emotionally detached from his wife. His mother was a nice person, but completely emotionally tuned out. When he would get in trouble, she would say, my son's a tzaddik. I don't know what they're talking about in school. So on the one hand, she was nice, not negative, but completely not in touch with reality or his emotional experience. He spent a good part of the first 8 months of treatment describing everything he tried to forget in his first 19 years of life. How there was constant tension in the home. Slowly, slowly, different stories were coming up, and he started to share about these different things that were happening, but everything was in an emotionally detached way. He would talk about how his father would almost torment one of his brothers, how he would act in this very much like, oh, you did this. He would take the kid's toy for like 6 weeks. A very, very sadistic, controlling style parenting method. But there was no feeling, there was no affect in the room. And there's a principle that when a client's affect is dissociated, it's projected with a much greater intensity. And I really felt all the sadness and the fear and the world that was destroyed, that he lost, and that his picture of his father that he was trying to bring in as not being perfect. I really felt it like very deep inside. Like when he would walk out, I felt like my room was like a sauna. The intensity and the it was literally, it was draining. It was draining. It was so intense. This was for 8 months. This went on. The Askin who was paying for his treatment became frustrated with the fact that the client who he was paying to get married did not restart dating. And he was seeing me twice a week. He pulled the funding from our sessions. I received a text message from the client saying he doesn't have any more financial backing and he's stopping the sessions. I called him and said, since we've been working so well together, I'm willing to give him a significant reduction in price to continue seeing him. He said, no, I'm going to stop. This surprised me, maybe even shocked me a little bit. I felt very attached in our sessions. I felt very much like I was really living in his pain and in his confusion and in the trauma. And it felt like you have a relationship with someone and then the next day, boom. And there wasn't even like, I feel so bad that I have to stop. We were going somewhere or so. There was just nothing. It was one day to the next. Text message. He's out after 8 months, twice a week of meeting him. So I was confused. Why would he stop in such a fashion and the way he did it with no discussion? But he wasn't seeing me. Life went on. About 10 months later, we'll call him Ruvain. It might be someone Ruvain, right, Maishi? Ruvain calls and says he has a job and is ready to restart treatment. In his first session back, I mentioned the topic of the abrupt stop. I asked, during our work together, were you able to feel my empathy? He responded, I didn't know that you cared about me. I didn't know I meant anything to you. I thought you were just listening you know, to get paid in a very regular fashion. I let him know that was very confusing for me, the way it went down. And he just said, once I make up my mind, I make up my mind.
So he's not really seeing you in the relationship at all.
Right, right. And we continued working, but this time I was much more cognizant to match his emotion. And I realized that he wasn't ready for a reciprocal relationship. And it could be that my deep empathy and connection to his story was part of why he had to stop. So that was good information. That was the first relational episode that I had that his story was so heavy and so intense, and I was very much feeling it and engaged with him. But yet, even with that, he wasn't able to feel that back. He wasn't able to feel my empathy. He wasn't able to take it in, and and that his way of working is really non-relational. That when he makes up his mind, the other person is it's as if they don't exist.
And I'm curious, did you find yourself after this little DMC with him, did you find yourself deliberately sharing a little bit more of how you feel towards him when something would come up? Deliberately, or maybe not deliberately, maybe unconsciously sharing that more.
Well, not really. I found myself very much, very much, much more intellectual. It's almost like the emotional part of myself was
Like he
weary.
chased, almost like he chased it away.
He chased it away. I became weary, emotionally weary, but I still felt a connection to him, and I still was very motivated to help him. But I was very much realizing that this could be scary for him. Okay, so that's our first relational episode. Now let's go into the second relational episode. In our work, he described feeling overwhelmed in his work environment. And overwhelmed meant that whenever someone would come over and say hello to him, he would feel like he lost himself. He was completely gone. He would sit at work with earphones in a cubby in a corner, working, hoping no one would say hello or notice him. So, very intense fear of social interactions. Now, you could call this social anxiety, but the way he described it was when someone does interact with him, he completely falls apart. And I was looking for a framework to make sense out of this. And the best the best framework I could find is a book from the 1960s by R.D. Laing called The Divided Self. R.D. Laing was a student of Winnicott and very much based in on Winnicott and Klein. And
That Robert Lang? He's a
no, Robert Laing,
different.
right? That's Robert Laing's.
Oh, right, that's right, with an S at the end. The
Right,
listening.
that's
He's the listening guy.
right. That's Robert Laing's. That's this is Robert Laing's, just for the okay. So anyway, so would it be okay, Maishi, if I just read a little bit from R.D. Laing?
Please. You have to ask RD, not me.
Nah, yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, he had a tough ending. He became alcoholic, a very brilliant person. A firm sense of one's own autonomous identity is required in order that one may be related as one human being to another. So if a person doesn't have a sense of self, otherwise any and every relationship threatens the individual with loss of identity. A hello, how are you doing? Threatens a person with loss of identity. One form this takes can be called engulfment. In this, the individual dreads relatedness. As such, with anyone or anything, or indeed even with himself, because his uncertainty about the stability of his autonomy lays him open to the dread, lest in any relationship he will lose his autonomy and identity. And this is something very fascinating. This is the name of the book is The Divided Self. I'm reading from page 44 because many times in session he would get on the verge of crying and he would stop. He would stop and say, I can't go further. And for me, I really wanted him to open up and bring this out. And I saw the fear in his eyes. And it really helped me to understand that if he would feel his own emotion, and for sure feeling his emotion in front of another person, that would completely obliterate his sense of self. Engulfment is not simply envisioned as something that is liable to happen willy-nilly despite the individual's most active efforts to avoid it. The individual experiences himself as a man who is only saving himself from drowning by the most constant, strenuous, desperate activity. Engulfment is felt as a risk in being understood, thus grasped and comprehended. So when I'm having this deep emotional connection to him, that's fear of him being engulfed. That's very dangerous to him. In being loved, or even in simply being seen. Remember, he sits in a corner of the office with his head down and earphones. To be hated may be feared for other reasons, but to be hated as such is often less disturbing than to be destroyed, as it is felt through being engulfed by love.
Well,
Yeah, so when I read this, it really gave me a context to understand this person. That he is very, and this is written in context of schizoid personality disorder. That R.D. Laing, The Divided Self, is giving a Winnicottian perspective on schizoid personality disorder and psychosis. And what he's doing over here is really starting to help me understand that this person is very, very scared in our treatment. This is a very scary thing for him to come in and to be seen by another person and to share personal details. This is not something that's easy.
can you just elaborate on that for a minute for those who may be struggling with this? How can it be that to be seen and to be heard, which so many, most of us crave, right? And that's why we talk to other people. How can that be overwhelming and engulfing and cause somebody to dissociate and fall apart?
Right. Well, because if you're holding on with all your being to keep yourself together at every moment, so then if someone sees you, there's then a connection. That connection is too intense. You don't have a vessel, an emotional vessel to hold it. So normally there is so many interactions between a mother and a baby where the baby shows her mother something and the mother smiles and then the baby smiles back. They just said, "Hey, we could share this interaction." The baby cries. The mother picks up the baby and and rocks her. She said, "Oh, pain isn't the end of the world. You could be soothed by pain. Another person could soothe you." Now, let's say you're showing your mother something, and she goes, "You're such a tzaddik. You're such a tzaddik." Like you didn't learn that having something is seen as fun and as ego enhancing, something that could be shared. It's just there's no connection. So the person then has no vessel to receive emotional reactions from another person. Their own emotions they can't handle. And when you validate them, you're now intensifying their emotions, which they have no vessel to hold.
So it's just too overwhelming.
It's too overwhelming. Right, right. It's in Winnicott's language, it's called annihilation anxiety. They're not afraid that they're going to be misunderstood or they're going to be lonely. They're afraid they're going to be destroyed.
So I also see it in the way that they're holding and containing themselves, and if they have to entertain more than that, then they're letting go of themselves. And if they let go of themselves, they'll fall apart. So it's like when a person is so overwhelmed, and so they're like focused and focused and focused, and you try to uh, ask them, where'd you put the whatever in the fridge? And then they start snapping and screaming and yelling, like, I just asked you where you put it. What's happening is that they can't hold themselves together under so much duress.
Mhm.
And this seems to be happening on a much more existential way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In a
Hmm.
very primitive way that really the basic container for affect wasn't developed. Okay, so we're starting to see this pattern of this what Lane calls ontological insecurity. We could call annihilation anxiety. We started developing awareness of triggers, how he responded, and his perception of other people detecting this. Now, when he goes into ontological overdrive, he falls apart, and he thinks that when he falls apart internally, everyone there sees him, thinks he's an alien, and shames him for it. So it's a internal process that he projects into everyone that's around him, and therefore he is now being shamed by the world as being seen as someone who is weird.
So it's time to hide.
So it's time to hide. So, right. So you try to step out. When you try to step out, you're then seen. When you're seen, you're then feeling annihilated. Now that you're annihilated, you have to go back into hiding, and then you're more afraid to step out again. Now that you're afraid to step out again, you get more in touch with your internal insecurities because society, interactions with society is actually a big part of psychic glue, of holding someone's psyche together. The more and more isolated you get, the more and more you get more tuned in to internal process, and the more and more sensitive you get. So it's this terrible cycle. And basically, my stance throughout working with this was that it's very deeply rooted in his psyche and that we're not going to have a simple solution to this. So I really stood with him and almost at my stance was almost like the pain of knowing you are going to put yourself out, you're then going to explode. When you explode, you feel like you're shooting poison across the room and literally like poisoning everyone within a I don't know 25-foot radius, and everyone says he's the guy that poisoned us, and you have no choice but to do it. So it's a real it brings up a lot of existential questions. of what's the purpose of suffering and what's the purpose of being an object of scorn, a public object of scorn, even though a lot of this is in his mind, but this is his experience.
Hmm.
I personally find the Torah of Ishbitz very illuminating in this area. Uh, you know, we have Yehuda in this week's parsha, who has to admit that he had relations with his daughter-in-law in front of Avram Avinu, in front of Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, and Shem Ve'aver. And the Medrash says that it was Satka Mimeni, that the action happened from a higher power, that he didn't even have choice in this action. And here you have someone that's an object of scorn, so to say, on an act that he had no choice on. And the Ishbitzer sees this as his taking this and taking his position that Hashem put him as paving the way for the light of Mashiach and not giving up and not letting it define him, but realizing that this is a position Hashem put him in. And it really gives me chizik in my work. You know, it strengthens me when you work with these type of people that in their minds, they're constantly publicly shaming themselves with no ability to do it differently.
You have to send me the source, and is that in Reb Tzaddik?
No, it's a mashiloach.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But it's really deep work, and we're spending years going through situations where he's starting to branch out. He's eating at families in the town he lives. He's reconnecting with family members. He's going to his siblings. He's going to cousins, and he's at the table, and someone will say, "What are you looking for in shidduchim?" And he just exploded all across the table, and everyone's staring at him and shaming him. And we would just unprocess this and how painful it is and how deeply rooted it is and how psychically determined it is.
And I just want to say, like, sometimes people, both lay people and therapists, will ask, why does therapy take 5 years or 10 years? It's a scam. And when you listen to your description, I could just imagine, I've treated people for many, many years also. And there are times where you can't get anywhere deep without 3 years of just shallow talk, where the person is again like redoing their primitive states and learning that sharing is safe, that somebody's actually interested and genuinely interested, not just in getting paid, but in being interested. I mean, we've all, as therapists, been shocked to hear clients tell us that, yeah, you're just listening to me because I'm paying you, when we've invested so much emotional energy in the relationship. This is, ubiquitous in therapy. And sometimes people just can't open up until so much of the early childhood stage is actually set for them for the first time at the age of 30. And it can,
Yeah, I'll tell you something funny, Moshe, that I had a client who came to see me and he would talk about anything but his issues for the first 40 minutes, nonstop.
Mhm,
Without me I couldn't get a word in edgewise. After 40 minutes, he would say, I got into a fight with my sister and I beat her up. We're talking about an adult person.
mhm.
Like, and then he would
No big
walk,
deal. Perfectly normal, perfectly
right,
healthy.
100, and then he would walk out of my room. And then the next week would be the same. It would take about 41 minutes for him to open up. And I watched this person progress and he different things were falling into place and he wanted to take a break from therapy. And that day we spoke for the same 41 minutes, but it just felt flat. And then I was like, "What's going on?" He's like, "Well, I want to take a break." So even in the discussion of, we would say small talk, you could feel the difference for when it's coming from a defensive place and there's really something it's fighting against, and when it's just shalashudas talk over the coffee room. It has a different flavor. It was fascinating.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. How many of us can tell? from the beginning of a session or from a second to last session when a client is about to pull out. I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's really evident. There's a certain death of energy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Okay.
Does
So,
anyone have any questions so far on what Dove has said, or are you just enjoying watching me do all the work, questioning him? Because I'm enjoying it. Okay, carry on.
okay. So then after spending much time understanding this dynamic, I asked him, does this ever happen in session? And he said yes. So I requested the next time this happens to tell me. So we were having a session and suddenly he got a little quiet. And I said, What's going on?" He said that we'll get back to that in 1 minute. I said, what's going on? He said, it just happened. You didn't see my face turn colors and you didn't feel this explosion and this dynamite and that the whole room changed and everything was different. I was like, honestly, no. I said, I didn't know anything about it. I said, I saw you a little bit more quiet. I was curious about your quietness. But I didn't think it was weird or off. You were just a little bit more self-absorbed. I thought maybe something we said maybe went down the wrong way or you were uncomfortable with something. He's like, seriously? And I was like, yeah. And this happened. And then he would bring in outside stories. And I would say, well, let's see. Did people talk to you later in the day? Did people talk to you later in the meal? Are you invited back to these people's houses? And he would say, yes, yes, yes. And slowly, he started to realize that he might not be shooting poisonous venom when he feels an internal explosion. And it might be that it's an internal experience that no one externally feels. So we took a external dynamic that became clear based on his external relationships, and then we brought that awareness into the therapy room to give him real feedback in real time. And I found this that, like you're saying, Maishi, sometimes it takes 2.5 years, 3 years till he's safe enough to admit that it's happening in the room with me. Because he looks at this as a terrible interpersonal act of violence. So he finally brings it up to me and he has the guts to bring it up. And I tell him, I don't notice anything. He said, yeah, but you moved your left leg. I said, I have pins and needles in my left leg. Unless you gave me pins and needles, I said, that's my left
I
leg.
just want, can we just point out the characteristic of schizoid personality disorder that they have certain quirky beliefs about things? Like in other words, this guy thinking that he's having these effects on people, how does that connect to his schizoid style?
Okay, so I actually have an article here that I was going to read from a little later, but this is from Nancy McWilliams. It's from 2006. I think it's a wonderful article. It's some thoughts about schizoid dynamics. So to sum it up, she says they're hypersensitive and they're hyperpermeable, which means that they are feeling vibes, like almost like Esther Bick talked about the skin ego, that they pick up things that no one else has a sensitivity for. It's almost like they have no skin. Everything goes in, everything goes out. That's their sense of self. Very permeable. They're in touch with primary process. So they hear things in primitive ways, aggression, sexuality. These things are mamish front and center in their interactions. They don't have a conscious mind to filter them out. Their defenses with withdrawal and retreat to fantasy. And we're gonna get into fantasy in a second. Their anxieties are fragmentation and diffusion. Their core conflict is about closeness and distance, but they have deep emotional bonds. And that's what I was really picking up in the first episode. They're really deeply inside, they're very emotional people. He's a very deep, rich internal life, this guy. But they feel very lonely. They're easily overstimulated, and impingements are experienced, and it comes from traumatic impingements. That their education, he has this father that's sadistic, he has a mother that's not emotionally there. So he's very easily feels other people entering his space. That's my summary of this article from McWilliams. I actually gave him this article to read because there's something very beautiful in this article. McWilliams writes, yeah, this article, she writes, yeah, okay. She writes, I have always found myself attracted to schizoid people. In recent years, I've realized that most of my closest friends are describable in this way.
Wow.
Yeah. And when he heard this, it was very, very powerful for him that he could actually have these sensitivities, have this hyperpermeability, have the struggles with closeness, and still be appreciated for his deep, deep, rich inside that is generally covered over with really strong defenses.
Wow.
And yeah.
Okay, any questions? Does anyone want to ask any questions live? Let's try to skip the chat box. If you have questions, just raise your hand. And if you could turn on your video, great. If not, just unmute and okay. You could carry on, Dove.
Okay. I didn't get to the part that will rile the oil up yet. That's the third relational incident. So, as we worked through these dynamics, he started meeting up with friends. He developed a friend, a support group. I remember he described to me the first time that he went to a singles a singles Kabbalah Shabbos, and the fear and the skier. He was embraced by the people. They embraced him. There was a family that he would eat by. They were lovely to him. He even went to a few single events. A schizoid person going to a single event. I mean, that's an accomplishment.
Hmm.
These were step by step. There was step by step growth, and he started dating here and there. He read The Divided Self. He read other psychoanalytic articles and books. He found them comforting. We were finally healing the cycle of primary awareness process. His feeling overwhelmed, then withdrawal, further primary process. He was engaging with society and enjoying it. He finally didn't feel like an alien. He finally felt, like McWilliams said, as someone that might be attractive to another person. So these were incremental gains. Now,
And I'm curious, was he acknowledging the changes or was he saying them very matter of factly and
he
not
was
saying
excited. He
he
was
was?
excited. He was excited. I even asked him if our relationship meant something to him, and he said something to the effect of, "I can't say it doesn't."
It's like the Rogachover telling somebody he's an Amoritz when he means he's a
Yeah,
Talmud Chacham, right?
yeah, yeah,
He said, if my Amoritz is pretty good, right?
yeah, yeah. He said Rabban Cutler once came to speak to the Rogatchover, so I told him. He said he didn't want 100%.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to do relational episode number three. So Ruvain started dating. Most of the girls he dated, he couldn't make contact with, and they didn't go past 3 dates. After about a year and a half of this, he finally found someone he liked. There was excitement in the room. This is amazing. He came in for dating, right? We're finally at the stage after 5 years of treatment, twice a week, where he's open to dating, not overwhelmed. Even the first time that he dated the women, he was liked because he's polite and no one, but now he's emotionally engaged. That time he was very, very far from being emotionally engaged. He decided to go to an event with his date, and things were looking promising. The next session, he walked in with a smile and said, I dropped her. On date number six, after taking her to an event that cost $150 per ticket, I felt rage rushing through my veins. I need a drink, I'm sorry. After all our work, he finally found someone compatible, and suddenly he could just drop her and devastate her, leading her on, and glibly say, I dropped her. This was too much. This was too much. I also knew that one of his most destructive defenses was his need for omnipotent control. Omnipotent control is a need to exert one's will that transcends every single value of empathy and morality. He is willing to lose his job over a ego battle. Everything's over control and power, and him exerting himself. And he just dropped her cold turkey. This is one more ego battle, where he's using his omnipotent control. Yeah. I made the decision to allow him to know how enraged he made me feel. I said something to the effect, when you say that with a smile, it makes me very angry to the point of having aggressive thoughts towards you. He said, why? I got such a high from this interaction. I exerted myself. I said back, that's exactly why I'm so upset. You got a high out of dashing this lady's hopes and dashing my hopes? That's what you got a high out of? I wasn't willing to move forward as long as he looked at this as a win. The room was full of tension, and after the third session of quietness between the two of us, I wasn't sure if our 5 year long relationship of collaboratively working together was strong enough to hold this amount of tension. Yeah. Now, there's something called the Boston Change Study Process Group. Boston Change Study Process Group is a group of developmental psychologists, pediatricians, and developmental researchers who came together to use the research from babies to inform adult treatment. And they wrote a bunch of very important papers. Some of the people are Daniel Stern, that's a famous developmental baby researcher, Louis Sander, Jeremy Nahum, um, Edward Tronick. They're really the who's who. So they have a concept called the now moment in treatment. This is one of the most famous papers in the last 30 years. It's called Non-Interpretive Mechanisms in Psychoanalytic Treatment. Non-interpretive mechanisms in psychoanalytic treatment, meaning what goes on in the relationship and how that's transformative. So they have something called a now moment. What they say is Now moments are not part of the set of characteristic present moments that make up the usual way of being together and moving along. They demand an intensified attention and some kind of choice of whether or not to remain in the established habitual framework. And if not, what to do. They force the therapist into some kind of action, being it an interpretation or a response that is novel relative to the habitual framework of silence. It's a unique moment of opportunity. He says they take all of a sudden the regular therapeutic environment has been altered. The
So like
current
this would happen when there's like a strong rupture because of some reason. That might be
exactly
an opportunity or something like that.
either a strong rupture or a strong positive moment.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Sometimes I find myself deliberately provoking something when I feel like it's a good time for it. Not very not often, but sometimes.
Yeah. 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 So this was a
It's like
now moment,
stoking something.
right? And now moments lead to moments of meeting.
Mhm.
A now moment that is therapeutically seized and mutually realized is a moment of meeting. As in the parent infant situation, a moment of meeting is highly specific. Each partner has actively contributed something unique and authentic to his or herself as an individual, not unique to their theory or technique of therapeutics. It has to be coming from a real place inside of you. It's not a technique. It's not a chop, so to say. When the therapist, especially, but also the patient grapples with the new moment, explores and experiences it, it can become a moment of meeting. The therapist must use a specific aspect of his or her individuality that carries a personal signature. The two are meeting as persons relatively unhidden by their usual therapeutic roles for that moment. Also, the actions that make up the moment of meeting cannot be routine, habitual, or technical. They must be novel and fashioned to meet the singularity of the moment. Of course, this implies a measure of empathy and openness to affective and cognitive reappraisal, a signaled affect attunement, a viewpoint that reflects and ratifies that what is happening and occurring in the domain of the shared implicit relationship, a newly created dyadic state specific to the participants. So, what you're trying to do is a relationship develops a dynamic over time. And what you're trying to do is you're now trying to change both parties' implicit way of working with one another. You're changing the basic structure and DNA of their dynamic.
You're suggesting that that's the therapeutic work of relational psychoanalysis or interpersonal, I'm not sure. Wherein you're actually seeking to create a dynamic shift so that this individual will ultimately experience how to relate differently to others. Am I getting that right?
Correct. That right now, he looks at every relationship as a chance of him to impose his will and to overpower other people. We're trying to change that where he could see that, hey, there's another person
Two
over there.
people, right?
Yeah. So after 3 weeks of this tension, he told me that he understands the way he dropped the girl was hurtful. He sent a text to apologize. They went they went back and forth and decided to give it a second chance. Then went out for another 6 weeks where they mutually broke their dating.
Shoots, I thought they'd get engaged and you would claim Shadchanis.
Yeah, yeah. I was also like, you could make good money now in the right circles.
That's right.
So he said the dating didn't work out, but it was a positive experience for both of them. And I think after that, there was a certain, he told me it was the first time he felt alive his whole life.
Wow. There was a shift in his he transcended something that seems like the second round was a newfound type of experience. He's doing it differently. He's doing it with another person. as opposed to with himself and another person.
Yes, yes, yes. And it was very well said, Maishi, very well said. And I think the fact that he realized that, hey, the whole world does not go around my subjectivity.
Hmm.
There is external objectivity. There's objects out there that are separate from me. That itself was like a wake-up call for him. That, Winnicott has this concept that when you try to destroy the object. The baby with their aggression tries to destroy the object. And when they realize they can't destroy the object, they then realize that, hey, maybe my anger is not so destructive. Any thoughts or comments on this?
Come on, guys. I had so many over the course of the talk. I'm curious to understand, first of all, your rage about his decision to cut the relationship to begin with. What was going on for you right there? Was this more about we worked so hard to get there and you just deflated what we did? Or was this more about how dare you hurt somebody else in this way? What was going on for you?
I think it was both. I think what really got me, though, more than anything, was his smile.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. That smile made me feel like, there's something going on here that's really uncomfortable. That's really coming from a very unhealthy
Like
place.
antisocial, like really antisocial,
Yes, yes, yes. That like really enjoying
mean.
exerting your will over someone else and hurting two other people at the same time.
And building it up. I mean, essentially, he builds up the relationship to a point that the drop is has a much bigger bang effect because he built it up so high. So that seems to be what he was excited about. But wouldn't you
Yes.
see that as just a defense mechanism to cover up his shame or his sense of failure?
It could be, but it crossed the first time he dropped me, relational fights at work, and this. So this is it's across many different spaces.
I see. Okay, Mimi, go ahead, please.
Hi. So first of all, very fascinating, very um difficult to understand, but very fascinating. Is there ever a time when a therapist would discuss with a client like it's not the time to get married or they should not be married? Like in your example, it seems like that would be dangerous for a woman to be married to him if he really truly gets enjoyment from exerting his will. Like that sounds like a scary place to have a relationship. Or what the other example, like that you said that you're working with someone who was a pedophile, even though he didn't act on it. That would also be that can be a dangerous situation.
Yeah, so I- I'll 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 answer you. First of all, regarding that, it's a very hard to understand. I would say that my son has a Rosh Hashiva who gives shir on a very high level, and he says after a while, it's just pashut pshat. After you listen to this enough, it's just really intuitive, naturally intuitive. So a lot of this stuff is very hard to understand, hearing it without context and without struggling on it and without really breaking it down into little pieces day in, day out. But once you do this for a while, it's just really very much in your face in the most simplest way to see it. So that's with difficult to understand. So I could fully relate to that. That many of these concepts I really could not grasp for 5 to 10 years after first learning about them. So it's really a long process to really appreciate. And I think it takes 2.5, 3 years for someone to be able to start implementing relational techniques. That's what I've seen working with therapists and training therapists and being trained myself. Regarding your second comment, he has a ongoing relationship with a group of people with friends, with family members, with people in the neighborhood. So I think he does have the capacity to develop a relationship. If someone is in a competitive relationship or even somewhat, you could say dating is evaluative, each person's evaluating the other. So then he's quite dangerous. But I would bet, I can't guarantee, but my guess is watching his relationships with many different people that he's able to maintain a relationship. And it could be once in a while he may get into this ego battle, and then they're going to need really intense couples therapy. But I think in general, he could maintain a relationship.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
When I hear you talking about your countertransference, so I guess it's so important for clients to recognize how they make you feel, or I should say the other, the object feel, and what effects they have on other people that they sometimes completely don't realize.
Yeah. A hundred percent. I really, it's a fascinating question to know what he thought my response would be to his smile after he saw how excited I was going through this process of him dating. What was going through his mind when he came in with a smile and said, I dropped her?
Hmm. I wonder what his childhood, attachment figures and what was going on there that he doesn't read the room or understand the effects of um, these kinds of behaviors on others. What does that mean about his early childhood and his attachment relationships, figures?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think his father very much had this omnipotent control way of doing things of, oh, you started with me, I'll take your toy for 6 weeks. Um, oh, you're drinking? I'll
So it was a sort of victory or success to, just like people who are extremely competitive, right? It's like everything is about the competition and the victory and success. They'll compete for something that they don't even want because it's in the competition. And it seems like this omnipotence or this power is really what means everything. And the fact that he was able to get her to such a point and then say, nah, you're not for me, and create that fallen face experience was where the thrill is. That's where he
yeah,
finds exhilaration.
yeah, 100%.
Go ahead, Pearl.
Hi. Thank you so much. I'm really enjoying this. And I also enjoyed your presentation at, I think it was the Neshama conference.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you saying that he disappointed two people, that was the woman and you? Did you mention that?
Yes.
And is that important that he's disappointing you in the process of dating?
It's not important that he's disappointing me. The thing is that the way he did it was lead me on. It's the way he's saying, "Oh, this could work. I'm excited about it," and then just switching. So it's not important, but it just shows like a certain like you're in something together with someone. So you tell them like, "Oh, that date went really bad." It's not. It's the way he did it. More if the date went bad and they got into a fight about something
Mhm.
and there was an irreconcilable difference that really he did not want to take on in his marriage partner. So then I would be 100% respectful for that. It's the fact that
I think Dove
he,
is saying this, the excitement that he got Dove and that he hurt Dove. That was really what was disturbing about this.
I mean, I get it, like that when he comes in with a smile to say that part, but like you felt he was leading you on as he was dating this woman?
yeah, meaning it's the same, it's across patterns. We have an 8 month relationship and then he stops it from the asking. And he gets a thrill out of this.
Hmm.
He's fight work. The boss says you have to do this amount of work. And he says, I'm only doing X amount of work. And he wants the boss to either fire him or he's gonna overpower the boss because the boss needs him.
Hmm.
It's it's this is a pattern. There's a pattern. So he's sitting here talking about the dates in an engaged way. So you come in, you say, "Oh, like it really." Instead, he's like happy, like you were into it, and now I could stick it to you the same way I stuck it to the girl. So
Hmm.
it's not that he has to get married to make me happy. I
No,
mean,
I understand
that's
that,
very
It's
right?
ugly.
the antisocial part of it.
Felt like that was intentional, right? So it seemed like he's flexing his muscles to show how powerful he is, and that's related to his childhood dynamic of being powerless. Am I getting that right?
Yes,
Or
and
interjecting his father's.
Right,
right,
right.
right. So
Yeah.
there's an identification with the father, a very strong identification with the
Mhm.
father,
Uh,
and a very strong identification with being powerless. So he's both the schizoid guy that has no keyboard, that has no vessel to receive any emotion or connection, and he's also the powerless, the powerful person with omnipotent control. So you have these two parts to him that is very confusing because he has
Mhm.
both the part of his father,
Right.
omnipotent control. I could just push my will through, and I don't care how it's going to affect my wife, my kids, my grandkids. That's one part. And then
Mhm.
you have the other part, which is the powerless little boy that's being acted upon with no sense of self and no vessel to receive anything.
But
Mhm.
isn't the omnipotence a coping mechanism for the second one? Like if I can be so strong, the number one, I've made it because that's what my father was. So now if I'm that, I've made it. And number two, I can't really be ever hurt by others if I'm so powerful.
Yeah, it's that. Listen, there anything that is so set in stone. You know, when we say something psychically determined, it doesn't mean a person doesn't have bechira on it. It just means that it's not talking about free choice. It just means there's four or five different strong psychological threads that are creating this rope that are strangling this person from it. So that's making him unable to breathe. So over here, he has the identification with the father. He has the defense against feeling vulnerable, right? He has yeah, we could think of different things that, he has the thrill of need for stimulation because he's feeling psychically dead. Yeah, there could be a whole range of different things that cause
So,
it.
I'm curious, from a relational and interpersonal perspective, would there have been a difference if you had explored and noted this behavior of his in a non-affective way? In other words, had you not become enraged and angry at him, would that have had less of an effect in the work?
So there's a book by Lou Aaron called Dramatic Dialogues, where he describes how we really have to take on it has to be a drama where we take on the attributes of the other side and we really play out the dynamic live inside the session.
Hmm.
And that there's something very rich about having something replayed in its
Hmm.
full primitiveness in a way that no one could do in the real world.
Hmm.
In the real world, people that he would do this to would cut off from him and would say, wow, that wasn't so nice. But over here, I've been working with him and we have a very strong relationship where I felt that we had an opportunity to really work through this dynamic. And since then, I have to say that therapy has been remarkably boring because he has had so much less emotional explosions. There was like a consolidation of himself in this experience.
So, and I'm also hearing that he came in because he felt emotionally dead, and this would seem to be the first real burst of energy in the therapeutic energy between the two of you, where he finally did something that was so provocative that it evoked lots of energy towards him in which he can finally start to explore some feelings.
Right. And I would almost say that, there was a lot of warm feelings between the two of us. He said that he can't say I don't mean something to him, which means that I'm very into psychoanalysis. He's begging me for books. I'm giving him R.D. Laing. I'm giving him McWilliams. I'm giving him Ogden. He's reading all of this. Very bright guy, very emotionally deep. So there's a lot of connection going on. There's a lot of warmth, there's a lot of connection, but there's nothing that encompassed this sense of aggression and hatred that he experienced and that was so live to him. So there's a famous line from Stephen Stern where he said, if you don't have a new relationship, then psychoanalysis doesn't start. But if you don't have the repeated relationship, then psychoanalysis never ends.
Could you explain that?
Meaning you need a new relationship, a relationship of warmth, of care. You need to develop
You mean
some,
between the analyst and the client you're talking about?
yes, yes. You need to develop some sense of self. And at the same time, if you don't have this hatred and this aggression and the negativity that is so much part of what grew up with, and you don't process that. And there was different times where we processed it, where I've called him out on the omnipotent control numerous times. And there was the point where he was bullying a family member. And I called him out on the bullying and I said, I'm really uncomfortable with the way you're behaving. And it didn't matter. It needed to be experienced in the full intensity to bring it home.
So these things are really powerful moments and powerful shifts that happen during throughout the therapeutic process. And we want to capitalize on them and not shy away from them. We want to be able to tell a client, I hate you right now, but let's talk about why. Not to not say it and not to say it and then leave them hurting and abandoned.
I didn't even say that though, Maishi, because I was saying that I can't sit with this the way it is. Because I didn't, if we're reflecting on it, he's going to go into a cognitive space and he still got his win. I did not want this to be a win for him because when he gets a win, it reinforces his idea that he is the ruler of the world.
Wow. Okay, does anybody else have any questions or anything to share on this? And Dov, is there anything else that you
Good
wanted
question.
specifically to share about the case? Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. First of all, hi, Doe. Nice to see you
Hi,
again.
how
It's
you
been a
doing?
while.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah. I'm just wondering when you talk about this kind of, it sounds like you kind of leaned into your own feeling in this context and you kind of just let yourself express the dynamic that was happening. I wonder how do you know you're not risking it in enactment? Like especially here, he seems to have evoked something similar to, let's say, the way his father reacts to him. You held something back from him that he wanted till he finally, kind of gave in. Which in general, I'm wondering, when we allow ourselves to just react on some level.
Well, I would say number one is I'm following this for quite some time. So I wouldn't say that it's just allowing oneself. It's really this has come to a head where it's hampering his life. The need to have omnipotent control and his thrill at dropping people in this way is stronger than his desire to get married and move on. So that's A. And B is that again, this is an extreme example of it because I had so many markers that I was on key over so many years. So I had a lot of confidence in my intervention. But normally, when you use your countertransference, you do it in a way that's just sharing your experience and you're open for the client to share their experience. So you're now willing to have a back and forth around it.
You're saying this particular situation where you went head to head with him and you pushed your thing on him is you're saying specific to this case because of your history.
Yeah, and listen, it could be that if we had two more sessions of this, I would have caved in. And I could not, if I gave in to him, I would have felt that he was shamed me and he chalked up a narcissistic win that would cause him tremendous damage in life. So you should just know, like, I'm using my rage, which was real, but I'm also drained after the session that I have to go through this with him. It's not an easy therapeutic tool. So
Mhm.
and I go back home, I'm not enraged. It's uh,
Mhm.
it's a very specific relationship, specific dynamic where there is no way that I could let him do this without it being destructive to him and to myself. So we
Mhm.
really were stuck. It could be in 2 or 3 sessions more that there could have been a way where he gave some acknowledgement to it, and I could have given some acknowledgement to his perspective, and it could have followed through a different path. I wasn't trying to get him to go back to date this girl.
Mhm. Mhm.
That wasn't my intention. My intention was that he had too much thrill. You ever hear the word klapt with a Geschmack?
Mhm.
You know, he was enjoying it way too much. But the goal is not to push your will on. The goal is to develop a space for your individuality and subjectivity to be processed so that the client can see that there's another person and there's another way of seeing things so that they could then make space for other people outside of the therapy.
And you
So
see
it,
this, you see this commonly with clients who don't hear you or see you, or they'll ask you a question, but they don't really let you answer, or they talk and take up all the space in the session and don't really pay much attention to you. If I understood your question, you were asking Dove whether there was a risk of reenactment by Dove reacting this way to him, sort of like he is forcing a reenactment on Dove and Dove's falling into the trap, if that's how I understood it. And I think that
Mhm.
Dove's awareness of what's happening in the dynamic is the whole difference. If a client creates a reenactment that the therapist allows himself to fall into, it becomes more grist for the mill for them to discuss and say, "Hey, I wonder what's happened in the past that makes you do this again in the present because this is what I felt. I felt rage towards you, and I wonder if you've done that to others in the past, or if people have done it to you in the past, and then be able to use that as grist for the mill,
Mhm.
as opposed to just a reenactment in which Dove is completely oblivious to, and then the client succeeded. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, and
Thank you.
I would say sometimes we get drawn into those. A lot of times enactments, we only know we're in an enactment after we're in it.
Right.
So we're saying, oh, that's interesting that I'm responding in this way. That's not characteristic of myself. What's going on between me and them that I'm falling into this type of thing? And then you could bring it up and you could say, I'm feeling a little bit on the defensive. Are you frustrated? So that would be a much more that would be a much more standard way of using your subjectivity in an enactment. This is an extreme case because we're dealing with an omnipotent defense.
Mhm.
Omnipotent
Mhm.
control is a defense where the person literally sees themselves as running this world like God.
Yeah, yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from anybody? Devora, please.
So my question, I guess, is just, first of all, this is so interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My question is about whether, can you do this with, all clients? Like I'm thinking, this client seems to have, even though there was not a lot of insight maybe in certain areas, like you had him reading books, he was interested in articles, like he had more of a sense of maybe the work that was being done. Whereas there's some other client, like, is that intentional in the work? Are you sort of letting him into that? Also, how does that play into the omnipotent piece? Like, if he's feeling like a lot of times what's happening in the room, the clients don't necessarily, and they don't always need to know what's going on in the room or in the, in terms of the theory or whatever. But it sounds like this client was getting a lot more of that. And I'm wondering if you were able to do this deeper work partly because of that.
Yeah, so I would say number one, he's reading Kleinian books. Kleinian literature is very direct, almost a rawness in their interpretations. So yes, it's a great point that he's really he's geared up for this type of work. I think that there's certain people whose sense of self is so fragile that to bring in another perspective too early could be very damaging. And there's a concept by Joyce Slachauer called bracketing, where what this person is doing to me is evoking this inside me, and I am bracketing my reaction because it is not a appropriate time for me to share it with the client. So there's definitely a concept of bracketing. I try very early in the first or second session to say, I'm very curious to know your feedback and how you're finding the sessions, and if there's anything I could do different, or if you are finding anything in the therapeutic relationship that you'd like to discuss. If you feel like I'm being too quiet or being too active, would you like me to be more concrete, more specific? Please give me this feedback. So, and then for the first two or three sessions, I check in at the end of the session. So we kind of almost build in this check-in and processing the therapeutic relationship very early on. But for some people, it would be definitely a big mistake to share your personal reactions. And for many people, though, it could be transformative. So it has to be done with care.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, last chance, last call. Not really, because we're gonna have Dove again, I hope. Dove, would you come on again?
Maishi, everything's up for negotiation. But I had a great time tonight, so I
As
don't see
always,
why
Dove, you're
not.
always so insightful and so fun to listen to and so engaging. And you always have like a surprise, I don't know, surprise comment or something that throws us off and makes us laugh. Go ahead, Takia.
Hi, one question. I was curious, it sounded a lot like avoidant personality disorder, what you were describing.
Funny, Takia.
And I'm wondering, was it the omnipotent control thing that made you choose define it as schizoid? Because his like flooding emotions, you said he cried in sessions, there were several things you said that sounded more like avoidant to me. And I'm just wondering how you see the differences.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, like I found the framework from R.D. Link to be helpful. Like we would have to take out like a diagnostic book and start working in the nitty-gritty of differential diagnosis, and that's for my purposes, the most helpful thing is that the diagnosis guides the treatment in a way that the client feels helpful, and he definitely fits into the way McWilliams dynamically describes schizoid. So it could be that the behavioral DSM diagnosis of avoidant has a lot of overlap with the dynamic understanding underlying schizoid. So it could be we're
But the
just
shame piece felt much more avoidant than schizoid.
well, the schizoids have disowned shame.
Okay.
Right, but that's a good point. That's a good point. It's messy, there's messy
Okay.
pieces.
I
There's
know.
a lot of overlap, and you have to go through the client or the DSM symptom by symptom to kind of make that determination.
Right. I'm using schizoid in its dynamic understanding, not in its
Clinic
but I
diagnostic.
like what you're saying about shame, though. I have to think how that fits in. I appreciate that comment.
Okay, let's jump to Mark because we were really out of time, but we're being nice. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
hi,
Mark.
sorry. My camera's
Guys,
not
next
working.
time, bring the questions on earlier. Well, Tria, maybe you'll start so that we can get the ball rolling like you used to do. Go ahead,
You
Mark.
guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Sorry, my camera's not working. Really informative, Dove, wonderful. Moshe, I appreciated all your, the things that you kind of along the way helped to facilitate to bring out. Just one question. What was that by the Lou Adams, the article that you quoted?
Lou Ahrens has a book called
Aaron's?
Dramatic
Sorry.
Dialogues. Dramatic Dialogues. It's a book that he died in 2018, and it's a book that came out in 2018. And it really does a great job summarizing a bunch of different schools to give you a broad range of different schools and how they all could be integrated into relational psychoanalysis.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody for joining. Thank you, Dove, once again. We hope to see you again in a few weeks on the next topic, unless we want to continue this. I really like the value that relational psychoanalysis brings to my work. I find it to be extremely powerful, but I did find some of the things that you said to be a little insightful and humbling. Like we really have to take stock, before, let's say, we target avoidance or avoidant behavior or other kinds of behavior in sessions, we really have to pay attention to timing. And, is a client ready to take on being confronted with some of their behaviors, whether it's avoidance, whether it is just a lack of feeling empathy, which is again pretty common theme with clients. They just like surprised that you actually care about them. That's like sometimes I find that maddening. Like how can you be surprised that I care about you? Where hasn't it been uh, noticed? But I'm hearing from you that some of these things have to be treaded with caution and timely. And you can't just, confront it right away necessarily and expect them to be able to tolerate that and palate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said.
Okay. Good night, everybody. We're turning off the